In a children's storybook, there lives a boy called Harold. When he was a baby, he was given a purple crayon, capable of making anything he draws come true. In order not to feel alone, Harold drew two friends, a moose and a porcupine. Since then, he's been using the purple crayon to create a world inside his book and lives great adventures alongside his companions. Years go by and Harold becomes an intelligent adult who can solve everything with his powerful crayon. But one day, when he realizes how he can create anything in his world, Harold begins to wonder who created him. Then a voice calls him from an unknown place, claiming to be his creator. He says that he created Harold with his own crayon and that he lives in the real world, a place full of colors, but much more difficult to live in than the fantasy reality of his book. Even so, Harold is obsessed with the idea of getting to know this reality, even though his creator forbids him to do so. The next day, he wakes up wanting to talk to his creator again, but he doesn't answer. Harold and his friends look everywhere for him, but there is no sign of the creator anywhere. So Harold decides to use his purple crayon once again and creates a portal that takes him straight to the real world. Without hesitation, he steps through the doorway and soon takes on a human form. While Harold is impressed by this colorful, three-dimensional reality, his friends decide to door alarm, but when Moose goes through the door, he ends up leaving Porcupine behind. Like Harold, Moose also becomes human when he crosses the passageway and soon finds his friend again. Meanwhile, Harold sees a gentleman sitting in the square and, believing him to be his creator, he runs towards him to give him a hug. As expected, the old man attacks him with his cane, proving that he is not the man Harold is looking for. So he and Moose decide to go after the real creator and, with his purple crayon, Harold creates a bicycle and they both set off towards the city. Shortly afterwards, Porcupine also manages to open the door and arrives in the real world, taking on the form of a young punk girl. She is happy with her new appearance, without realizing that her friends are riding their bikes down the road nearby. However, while crossing a street, the two almost hit a mother's car with her child. This causes the moose to assume his original appearance for a second, but he soon reverts to human form and ends up falling off his bike, along with Harold. The young mother, called Terry, rushes to help the pair, but the accident has caused the car's tire to go flat. She then calls from her cell phone to ask for help, but without her realizing it, Harold draws a new spare tire with his crayon, which leaves Terry's son, Nell, very impressed. As a thank you for helping her with the car, Terry offers them both a ride home and lets them sleep in her garage for the night. Later, Nell calls Harold to show him his drawings and he is impressed by the boy's creativity. Nell seizes the opportunity and asks how Harold was able to create the step, and he says he did it with his purple crayon. Although it looks like an ordinary purple crayon, Harold gives it to the boy to test and, by drawing in the air, Nell creates a mixture of a fly and a spider that soon comes to life. The two continued to have fun with the crayon until, in a nearby street, Porcupine continues to look for her friends. She follows their tracks and ends up in a luxurious mansion. Without hesitation, she grabs the owner's clothes and steals food from the fridge, but it's not long before the house alarm is triggered. Luckily, the young woman manages to escape through the garden and jumps over the fence, but her escape is captured by the local security camera. The next morning, Terry wakes up for another day at work, only to find several pies on the table when she goes downstairs. She finds this strange and goes to talk to Harold, who is with Mel and Moose having coffee. He says that the pies were created thanks to his purple crayon and that he also used it to renovate the paintwork on Terry's house. Obviously, Terry doesn't believe this purple crayon story and says it's time for Harold and his friend to leave. The two obey, but before they leave, Harold gives Mel a piece of his crayon as a present. As a thank you, the boy decides to help the two of them find their creator. But the only clue Harold has is that their creator is probably an old man. Because of this, as soon as an old man appears in the middle of the street, Harold runs to hug him, believing that he has finally met his maker. However, in response, the old man knocks him to the ground with a wrestling move and returns home. Despite this blow, Harold finds a pamphlet on the ground talking about the town library. He decides to go there to look for clues about its creator and then draws a skateboard and 2 roller skates with his crayon so that the 3 of them can get there more quickly. In the library, the trio meet Gary, a librarian who writes fantasy stories aimed at adults. When he meets Mel, he offers to help the boy and his friends, just to please his mother, for whom he has strong feelings. However, none of them have enough information to be able to find Harold's creator online. Not having the patience to look any further, Gary suggests that the 3 of them try to lure out this creator, and Harold, motivated by this idea, decides to use his purple crayon again. The trio leave the library and Harold starts drawing a huge airplane with his crayon. Gary, who was watching the whole thing from the window, is amazed to see that the crayon really is magic, and this reminds him of an old literary tale called Harold and the Purple Crayon. Searching the library, he discovers that the guy with the crayon is a fictional character created by the author, Crockett Johnson. Somehow, the fantasy has come true and Gary realizes that, with the power of the purple crayon, he can finally become a hugely successful writer. Meanwhile, Harold and his friends fly their plane over the city. As soon as they reach the clouds, Harold activates the plane's colored smoke and draws Terry's contact number in the sky so that her creator can get in touch. Because of the plane's movements, Moose once again assumes his original form, piercing the ship's hull. This causes the plane to activate the ejection seats, and then the three of them are thrown out. But Harold saves them all by drawing a parachute. By coincidence, the trio begin to land very close to Mel's school, who is already late for class. Harold and Moose let the boy go and look at the message they made in the sky. Same old man, call me, along with Terry's phone number. What they didn't realize was that several elderly people were going to start calling the young mother, believing that she was looking for a husband. Terry is then tormented by dozens of calls from strangers, which leads the manager to reprimand her for using her cell phone during working hours. The day started off strange for the woman, but it gets worse when Harold and Moose arrive at the supermarket where she works. Terry meets them both and soon discovers that it was they who passed on her number without permission. The young woman gets angry and tells them to leave, but she receives another call on her phone, this time from the principal of Nell's school. The woman tells her that the boy got into a fight at school and ended up hitting one of his classmates in the nose. Terry then has to go there to pick up her son, but if she abandons her job, the manager will fire her. Harold and Moose offer to help and, without much choice, she accepts. After giving them uniforms, Terry asks them to move the items from one shelf to another. The two follow her orders, however. Harold and Moose soon find the activity too tiring and decide to go to the aisles of the store to help the customers. Moose soon becomes interested in the huge television on sale in the store and goes to watch it, using his headset to listen to everything. At the same time, Harold starts using his purple crayon in an attempt to help customers, but things don't work out. He helps an old lady reach the highest shelf, but he does this by creating springs in her shoes and causes her to trip. Next, a boy is playing in a toy helicopter, so Harold creates real propellers to make it more fun. The problem is that the toy starts flying and messes up the entire store. Minutes later, Terry returns to work, only to see the place completely destroyed. She goes to confront Harold and Moose about it, but when the manager realizes that she was the one who let them make this mess, he fires her from the store. Although frustrated by the whole thing, Terry is convinced by Mel that her friends were only trying to help her and that she's better off without this job. This convinces Terry to accept Harold and Moose's apology, and they all go for a walk in the park. The young mother confesses that her true dream has always been to be a professional pianist, but since the perishment of her husband, she feels she has lost her vocation. Once again, Harold decides to help her with his purple crayon and, in a moment of distraction on Terry's part, he creates a piano in the middle of the park. She is impressed to see the instrument and Harold asks her to play a song. Even though she's been afraid because she hasn't practiced for a long time, Terry agrees to the request and her talent with the piano begins to attract many people. Far away, two detectives, Love and Silva, are investigating a complaint made by the old man with the cane in the park, who was approached by Harold and Moose a few days earlier. Using the park's cameras, the two have obtained a photo of the suspects and are looking for them. In addition, the detectives are also after the porcupine, who had her photo taken by the cameras of the house she broke into. Meanwhile, she continues to search for her friends and finds more traces of them along the way. The young woman goes to investigate at a diner, where she sees several items in food painted purple, but she ends up having a disagreement with one of the waitresses. Annoyed by her attitude, Porcupine starts eating everything in the diner without paying and tries to escape. The manager shows up to prevent her from leaving, but she escapes by jumping over the customers' tables and heads for the door. By coincidence, the detectives were in the car parked next to the diner and soon recognized the fugitive. The two run after her, but Porcupine manages to lose them by hiding high up in a tree. The chase continues as Terry finishes her musical performance and is applauded by everyone. Gary was even driving by the park in his car and, when he saw Terry there, he wasted no time in going up to her and congratulating her on her talent. What's more, he tells Harold that he's discovered who his creator is and promises to help him find the old man. However, Nell finds Gary's kindness a little suspicious and asks to go along, but her mother warns them that it's time for them to go home. Harold and Moose then accompany Gary to a secluded part of the park and the writer reveals where they both came from. He shows them Harold's book and says that it was the imagination of the author, Crockett Johnson, that turned him and Moose into real beings. During the conversation, Porcupine also appears and finally meets her friends. However, the reunion is soon interrupted by Detective Silva, who jumps on Porcupine and handcuffs not only her, but also Harold and Luce. The three of them are taken to jail, and the worst thing is that the Purple Crayon has been kept in the police station cupboard. Even so, they come up with an escape plan, and when another inmate is put in the cell, Porcupine attracts the policeman's attention, allowing Luce to slip through the door unnoticed. He quickly manages to get hold of the Purple Crayon, and Harold uses it to draw an iron ball, and with it, he destroys the prison walls. Now the three friends are free, and the next morning they set off on a powerful motorcycle to Mel's school. The boy sees his friends through the window and runs to talk to them, but the same classmates he fought with before come back to bother him. They lock Mel in a storeroom and make fun of him, but he remembers the piece of the Purple Crayon that Harold had given him. Thanks to this, the boy draws a picture of his imaginary friend, Carl, who is a mixture of a dragon and a bird. The creature then comes to life and, with its enormous strength, destroys the storeroom door, freeing Mel. The boy then runs into Harold, Luce and Porcupine, and together the four of them set off in search of Crockett Johnson. Mel uses his cell phone to find the location of his house, which is isolated in a wooded area. Finally, they find the house and Harold hurries to meet his creator in person. However, the door is answered by a lady who sadly reveals that Crockett Johnson has passed away and that his house has become a museum of his works. This information shocks everyone, especially Harold, and explains why he and his friends never heard the creator's voice again. Soon afterwards, Terry appears in front of the museum, having been informed by the school principal about Nell's disappearance. She scolds her son for running away like that and tells Harold to stay away from her and the boy, as his presence has only attracted more trouble. Harold apologizes and comes to the conclusion that, throughout his life, he has always done things the wrong way. In the midst of their sadness, Moose and Porcupine notice that the bicycle created by the Purple Crayon has started to disappear. Not only that, but they disappear too, as if the magic of the crayon is getting weaker and weaker. Finally, it's the turn of Terry's spare tire to disappear in the middle of the road, and she and her son narrowly avoid a serious accident. While she asks for help to fix the car, Harold walks alone and sad along the road until Gary shows up with his car. He promises to help Harold fix things, and the two set off back to the library. On the way, they pass Terry's car, and, seeing Harold with Gary, Mel suspects something is wrong. On the way home, the boy also notices that the paintwork on his house is gone and believes that something bad is going to happen to Harold. He then tries to convince his mother to help his friend, but she just tells her son to go back to his room. Hours later, Harold arrives at Gary's library and he convinces him to give him his crayon to get everything back to normal. He accepts and gives the guy his crayon, but in return, Gary draws a dungeon and locks Harold up with chains. Fortunately, Nell gets tired of waiting and decides to run away from home to help his friend, but when he arrives at the library, he is also captured by Gary. Finally, the villain uses the crayon to destroy the floor and the roof, leaving Harold and Nell trapped and with nowhere to run. The villain then draws a carriage outside the library and runs off, leaving Harold and Nell behind. Luckily, the boy still had the piece of crayon in his trouser pocket, and with it, he drew keys to release the chains. He then draws a huge balloon and, together with Harold, the two of them run off in search of Gary. The boy's attitude makes Harold believing himself again, and all his magic is restored. Just then, Terry went to talk to her son in his room and found out about his escape. She runs to the car to go after him, and then, she sees the paintwork on the house being renewed, proving that Harold's magic was indeed real. Terry then goes in search of Harold and Mel, who finally find Gary fleeing through the park and use a hook to knock him out of his carriage. Harold then appears before the villain and asks him to return the crayon, but Gary refuses and challenges him to a duel. The two adversaries face each other until they draw their crayons and a battle of spells begins. Harold summons a rope to lasso Gary, but he counters by drawing an axe and cutting the lasso. The villain then draws a medieval weapon with a ball of thorns attached to a chain. With it, Gary runs towards Harold to attack him, but he fights back by drawing a huge fan and pushing the man away. Even so, Gary doesn't give up and creates a catapult with which he throws a huge rock at Harold. Needing to think fast, Harold draws several circles around himself, creating a giant spring that pushes the rock back towards the catapult. Gary is defeated and Harold tries to take his crayon, but instead of handing it over, the villain swallows it. Because of this, all the magic of the crayon manifests in his body and Gary is transformed into a powerful sorcerer. Seconds later, Terry appears on the battlefield to find her son and finds out what happened to Gary. The villain seizes this chance and offers her a place at his side in the creation of a new kingdom, but she refuses. Faced with this rejection, Gary summons a double-bladed spear and uses its magic to turn the whole place into a pool of lava. Harold runs to help Terry and Mel, but the lava pushes him back and he ends up dropping his crayon. All seems lost, but Nell once again summons his friend Carl, who flies towards Gary. The little dragon uses his flames against the wizard, but he fights back by throwing chained balls at Carl, who falls to the ground wounded. Gary declares himself victorious in the battle, but suddenly Moose and Porcupine appear, restored once again. The pair set off to help Harold, with Porcupine retrieving the crayon and giving it to his friend. Harold draws another picture, this time of a spider fly identical to the one Mel had created. He sends the creature flying towards Gary and the spider fly enters the man's mouth. Then it's Moose's turn to attack and, for a quick moment, he reverts to his original form and attacks the villain with his antlers. The blow causes the villain to expel the spider fly from inside his stomach, but it leaves with the purple crayon he had swallowed. Thanks to this, all of Gary's evil magic is undone and everything returns to normal. Regretting his defeat, Gary says he did it all because he wanted to make his fantasy world real. Despite everything he's done, Harold decides to grant his wish and draws a portal, which leads to the fantasy world of Gary's books. Satisfied with this, the librarian walks through the door and, to make sure he doesn't cause any more trouble, Harold closes the portal and Carl destroys it with his flames. Another day passes and Harold and his friends visit the Crockett Johnson Museum. There, he finds the drawings and sketches of his creator and is thrilled to discover where his origins came from. Even so, he wants to know what led Crockett to create Harold and his book. The museum caretaker gives him the answer, through a letter that the author himself wrote to Harold. It is revealed that the character was created as a symbol of the power of imagination. He hoped that Harold would be able to encourage children to be creative and shape their own world. These words make Harold very happy and he finally decides to use the purple crayon to create a portal back to his world. Before he leaves, Mel presents him with a collection of colored crayons so that he can add more life to his home. Finally, Harold and his friends thank him for everything and return to their fantasy world to experience new adventures. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.